Episode 99, Two Chaps, Many Cultures, 99, or if you're in Australia looking the other way up, it could be 66. But we're not going to debate that today. We're going to talk about international sports around the world with somebody who knows it quite well, navigating different cultures and different parts of the world when you're coaching elite sports people. Stick around. Welcome back to all the cool kids.
Cool kids? All right, cool kids. Welcome back. Episode 99, 66, 33. Two Chaps, Many Cultures. Sports? The world of sports? What are we talking about?
Yes, the wild world of sports. A wild world of sports.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, a bit of a play on quite a famous show that I think may even still be on Australia called The Wide World of Sports. But you know, it was a really something that everybody tuned into on a Saturday morning, and we covered sports from all around the world. Let me tell you, this was a show that really it went for hours, and they would cover all kinds of like interesting sports, obviously the Australian sports and all that kind of stuff, but they would cover sports from all around the world. And it was just a great show. So, sports.
We make a cultural reference that nobody outside of Australia is.
No.
Okay.
The reason I'm doing that is because we do have a guest from Australia today who would know exactly what I'm talking about. But, and, of course, when we're thinking about our guests, what do we normally do, Kristen? We like people that are suave, sophisticated, experienced, really, really knowledgeable, and just all around good people.
You mean the opposite of you and I?
Unfortunately, all those people were busy, and we've got Ben.
Great intro, mate. Thank you.
How are you, mate? Good to see you.
Good, mate. Good to see you guys. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Doing fantastically well. Thank you very much for joining us. And where are you joining us from today?
Oh, I'm joining you from Oceanside, California. I'm just in the last parts of packing and heading off for my major part of my year, which is being based out of Colorado for about 4 months as we get our season off and going for our World Cups and professional events, and fingers crossed we'll be okay this season.
When you say your season, then I would suspect, going by the image of our show today, it has something to do with snow crystals and mountainous inclines.
That is correct, mate.
Okay,
I'm one of the older ski and snowboard coaches out there, I guess. Been doing this for about 23 years, so I work with Olympians, professional athletes in both skiing and snowboarding. So it's been a very fun career. So that's what originally got me over to the United States as an instructor, and got married. Wasn't married anymore. Had 2 kids, and I've been here for about 20 years. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Now, for those of you watching the wide world or wild world of sports, obviously it's clear to everyone around the world that the typical sport that Australians are really good at is skiing, cross-country skiing, snowboarding, maybe curling, everything with has to do with cold weather, right? That's typically Australian, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 11 months in the snow, mate. Yeah, actually, believe it or not, we're probably one of the very successful ski countries, believe it or not. We've got a great snowboard team, great aerials team. We've won 3 Olympic medals. We've had multiple world champions. I was lucky to coach a couple of them, which was fun in the last part of their career, and we're doing okay. And we also had Steve Bradbury, that won the gold in Salt Lake City in speed skating. So we've done okay for a little island nation, mate.
Yeah, we've put a punch above our weight in that area.
We definitely do.
Yeah, it's very strange because we meet people, and no doubt Ben has the same experience, and people say, does it even snow in Australia? And well, it does in certain areas. People we're not crazy enough to live in this stuff. You have to go up and make it a destination. But yes, we have a little bit of snow, but it does. It's interesting, isn't it, Ben, that for a place that really is not known for it, we do punch above our weight for a small island in those areas. What do you think that's down to?
I think for Australia, mate, we're a naturally pretty athletic country. We've always had for board sports and things like that, and and we've got good government-funded sport generally in Australia, like a lot of nations have. So we've got good investment from the government, from the Australian Winter Institute of Sport. It's funny, my kind of major deal now is working for Great Britain. Believe it or not, I look after their ski half-pipe team, and even there we've got 17-year-olds that just won World Cups last year, and we've got guys that are favourite for the Olympics coming up. So it's funny how these smaller nations with funded sport are actually starting to really go well. I think one of the weirdest things, obviously, Norway's is a pretty alpine nation, but they've only got a population of 19 million, something like that, and they swept the results in the last Olympics, in winter sports. So it's interesting how it goes, and Australia's just a sporting nation that gets behind everything.
Yeah, you made that point, Ben, and I think this is something that has to do with culture. And I might be off here, but I'm just asking a devil's advocate question. Australia being a nation and a culture that is fairly competitive, however, not in this, at least how it appears to me, not in this cutthroat, elbows out, I'm going to win and I'm going to win over somebody else at somebody else's expense, but as this chummy, matey athleticism, right? That swimmers mainly, or rugby, Aussie rules. Yeah, some might say cricket, maybe. So some of the sports that we associate with Australia when we first think of Australian sport, even soccer, right? The Socceroos. So in my image, is how I perceive Australia is a culture that likes to compete or likes to be sporty, athletic, live outdoors, or do the sport indoors, doesn't really matter, but compete at a level that is not belligerent or that is not combative, but more of this is a healthy competition. We measure ourselves, right? This is what I associate with Australia. Does that make Australians good? Is that why Australia punches above its weight in many sports that you wouldn't naturally associate with your country?
Yeah, look, I think so, mate. I think I think everyone growing up, probably Brett will agree with this, in Australia plays sports. And the good thing is every country's got its own, unique situations, right? For Australia, and I think for a lot of the Commonwealth countries, you are able to play sport your whole life. There's not a cutoff at a certain age where if you're not good, you're out. So I played rugby until I was, how old was I? 33. I played a couple of seasons over here, and I was a decent rugby player, but I was able to play in lower grades. I was able to play with my friends. I was able to keep playing that way. So I think that we've always just grown up really celebrating participation in sport, and we've just had pathways that are able to take our most elite sports people to the top. So I think it's just having participation, a love of the outdoors. There's always healthy competition. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in what sport. Aussies are just I think we're kind of bred that way. And I think Aussies generally have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder, so that generally helps in the sporting world. So I think that you probably hit the nail on the head there, Christian.
Well, speak to that in terms of your coaching approach then. Do you take that chip on the shoulder, and you don't mean that obviously in a negative sense, there is that.
Not at all.
So are you, when you're trying to pass that on to a kid or an athlete that is not an Aussie, how much do you kind of bring that into your coaching style, given the fact that that maybe they weren't brought up that way, or I'm interested in that. I've never done international coaching, so it's an interesting question for me.
Yeah, man, and I'll tell you, I made a ton of mistakes early because I was like, how I was raised, it was like, if you're not hurt, keep going,
Right.
And So when I started coaching kids from different countries, I had to really be careful that, I was kind of known early as a really, really hard coach. And I was just like, well, I don't think I've been that hard. I'm just being pretty normal for what what I was brought up in. And I coached when I lived in Australia. I coached tennis and surfing and rugby and a whole lot of sports. So I definitely, had some headbutting moments early in my career. With parents and with athletes, with people within the sport, just because I was doing what was my normal mindset and not really thinking about where all my kids came from. So I think as I've gone through, learning about different cultures, learning how even different cultures amongst states in the United States is different, and then I've been fortunate as I've coached kids from Korea and Japan and New Zealand and Australia and France and Germany and England and a whole lot of people, Chile, Mexico. So there's, that's a big amalgam of different nations, So I had to learn that how I did stuff in Australia and how I was brought up to learn things and through my learning style and all that sort of stuff had to be really changed and fitted to each kid. But then also knowing that there's a certain amount of norms that happen socially and culturally within certain countries where you have to know how that works to actually get through and be the best coach you can for your kids.
Yeah, just like running a business, isn't it?
It is a business, mate.
It is a business. Yeah. Sports. Yeah, sports is certainly a business nowadays. That's for sure. Yeah.
I have a suspicion here, Ben, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. Snowboarding is, in terms of alpine sports or winter sports, comparatively young discipline, right? So originally there was skiing, there was downhill, and there was cross country, and in came snowboarding. And it when it appeared on the scene, at least in Europe where I grew up, it created some conflict around the traditionalists and this new stuff there. This fad, this is going to pass, and is going to do this forever, and blah blah. This some crazy kids. And well, I don't know, 30, 40 years later, it's still around and as competitive as ever. It's Olympic. So it was more than a fad, obviously. However, it also brought to the winter sports a whole different generation. It opened this scene to the skater kids and the surfer kids, right? It made it accessible to people that previously had nothing to do with winter sports because they probably didn't live in winter sport geography. They were either city slicker kids or beach heads. So would you argue that, or agree that the skateboarding, the snowboarding sport has been a cultural challenge to the rest of the winter sports to begin with, and now is occupying its own bubble with its own talent pool that is probably different from the other winter sports?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What's strong in alpine skiing still is it's a very European-based culture, right? So how alpine is seen is very mechanical. How it's seen, I'm not saying every coach is like this, but I worked in a really big alpine club in Vale. And so when we first came in as a program, we were just like these loose cats that really were passionate about our sport, wanted it to snow all the time. From things like just how our kids operated, culturally and socially amongst each other, versus how they operated and connected with kids from different sports was a bit of a culture shock for everyone, I think. Trying to get our kids to do dry land, like we had, trying to get our kids to do off snow training was like pulling teeth. It was incredible at first. And remember, I started way back in 2001, so that's 20 years ago. But it was definitely a lot different, and I think the thing with alpine skiing, the Nordic versus snowboarding, free skiing, is that the type of person can be a little bit different. Alpine, Nordic's very regimented. It's based on time. It's based on a lot of endurance. It's based on a lot of technique, versus snowboarding, which is about people that are a bit more creative, people that think they're different. They're individuals. And so as the sport grew and then even went into the Olympic, pool of sports, that was a problem. Not a problem. That was a difference as well. You've got a group of very individual people that see the creative side of snowboarding and free skiing and surfing and skateboarding, going through it now with the Olympics as well. They're both in the Olympics too, versus those more traditional sports, you'd like to call them. Right. So it was definitely a difference originally. I think what we've seen now with snowboarding being in the Olympics for such a long time, it was in there in 1998, that most of our best guys now have got dry land, off snow programs, nutrition, maintenance programs, wax techs, the whole deal. They're pretty much everything that all the alpine guys do now. There's still that, obviously there's still the creativity, there's still the acrobatic part of the sport. That's why it's the most popular sport at the Olympics, by TV ratings, but definitely different, Christian, like totally. Yeah.
Is that why you spend your summer in Carlsbad or in Oceanside, because you get in the waves and you get to practice the similar skills on the water, or is this completely unrelated?
My background was surfing, so I was a failed competitive surfer. So I think it's more just for my mental health, mate, that I've moved out here. But to be honest, it's just more central for me out here. So we're on, now we're on snow from May. We go from May to April every year, pretty much. So just gives me a break being out here and surfing. And a lot of my kids are getting into surfing now, which is great. A lot of my athletes, so that's cool. So I take them surfing occasionally. So that's fun.
So what you use the term dry land a bit. So what is a dry land program? I mean, in terms of its relationship to coaching and building abilities for the snow.
So dry land is anything off snow. So it can be anything from strength training, power, agility, acrobatics. So we do a lot of stuff on trampolines. We do a lot of gymnastic stuff. We try and peak our guys so that in summer they're a little bit more in the gym. They're a little bit more working on physical fitness, versus when we get into the season like we are now, we're talking about maintaining that fitness as we go through, and it's more of a concentration on, on snow stuff. So yeah, that's all dry land means, just off snow training. Very
cool. And you said you're about to head up to Vale. You're heading back to the fields, and so this is preparing. What events are you preparing coming up in the next? How far do you think out in terms of your planning for these kind of things when you're building an athlete program?
We have. I try to tend to do it in long term and short term. So short term would be 12 months. Long term, I base it around every Olympic cycle, so it's 4 years out. So yeah, so it takes a lot to plan. Obviously, we're determined by what the weather does. So you're always trying to be proactive, but half the time you're being reactive just based on the weather. So you've got to be really flexible. You've got to have contingency plans for everything. And then obviously going through COVID, that was another, wrench in the works, so to speak, to deal with that. So yeah, we try to, and then with every athlete, we're trying to plan them when to peak, when we want them skiing and snowboarding at their best, when they can have rest periods. Yeah, so there's quite a lot that goes into it. Cool. Without sounding too much like a nerd.
I'm curious what it is like for somebody. And first of all, let me bench this question. Did you ever compete at an Olympic level yourself?
No.
So what is it like to prepare athletes for a level of proficiency or skilledness or talent that you were not able to get to it for whatever reason? That it's not about you having a chip on your shoulder, but how do you navigate yourself as an athletic coach in an arena that you never entered as an active athlete, but that you're now preparing other athletes to perform in? I'm having trouble imagining that. I'm curious.
No, good question, man. I think, Look, it's, I tend to throw coaches in with, with teachers in a lot of ways. Coaching's an art form. It's an apprenticeship. And what you do as a coach, you develop as a coach as your athletes develop as well. So when you're talking about lower athletes, you're really talking about technique and teaching them tricks and all that sort of stuff. When you're talking about athletes at the highest level, our job's just to take as much as we can off their plate so they can concentrate on what they need to do to perform at the highest level. So, it's, you go from being a coach to a facilitator to dealing with sponsors to dealing with national governing bodies to a whole lot of stuff. A lot of it comes with like any job experience. It's funny seeing snowboarding and skiing as a job because everyone goes, it's the coolest job ever. And I'm like, it is, but I work just as hard as most other people, probably harder in a lot of ways. So I'm always looking at what the rest of the world's doing. I'm always having to, I can't even say the word, probably prognosticate where the sport's going to go and where my guys need to go and what can they have that's different from everyone else. So it's a really good question, Christian, because it's funny. There's a lot of the best coaches in sport generally. A lot of them have never done it at an elite level.
And I'm happy you're clarifying it this way, because this is often questions that I get. I'm not sure, Brett, it might be similar for you when a client would say, well, how can you coach a CEO or senior level executive if you've never been in such a position, right? But our job is not necessarily to be in their seat. We would have their job probably. Our mission or our goal is to make people in that role the best they can be, and that in your case is technique, is dry land, right? All the aspects of dealing with sponsors, government bodies, and whatnot. So there's a coach doesn't have to have been in that same spot before in order to be an able and enabling coach. That's a different role than, let's say, a mentor who has been there and is pushing the elevator for somebody else to reach that level. That's a different role. A coach doesn't have to have been in that same position as the coachee. So yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, and look, mate, a lot of it's advocacy, right? You've got to be an advocate for your athlete. You've got to, you've got to know the sport inside and out. You've got to know rules. You've got to know waxing. You've got to know temperatures. You've got to. There's so much that goes into it, and it's much like you were saying, training CEOs, right? As a head coach or a program director, you're a leader, and you've got to know about coaching styles and learning styles and what makes the kids tick. And there's, the biggest part that I think a lot of coaches miss is the sports psych side about, what are the performance triggers? How do we help them visualize? How do we help them plan out runs? How do we help them cope with stress? How do we help them cope with depression, cope with mental issues, cope with COVID? I'm sure I work corporately in Australia, so I know that a lot of the skills I learned corporately, a lot of skills I've learned in coaching, I would say merge. There's no real difference. It's just I'm lucky to work in sports.
Yeah, well, I mean, I use a lot of sports. I know Christian does too. Sports as a metaphor when we're working with clients. We use different sports to peg approaches to managing teams, motivating people, and things like that. So they're really never far away from each other. That's why I think a lot of organizations like sporting figures to come in and be motivational speakers for their people. I think they understand the struggles that go with it, and can bring that perspective. And of course, it brings fun, right? The sports part of it brings fun. So I think, I'm jealous too, mate. I think you've got a great job. I want it. Maybe you can teach us to come when we come up there. You can teach us to. I hated snowboarders. Like when I was skiing, I'm getting back to what Christian said before. The snowboarding came along and we hated them. So it was like these snotty nosed little kids. It was shooting across
People are scared of stuff they don't know, mate. People are scared of things that are different. It's kind of a bit of an it's kind of a bit of an analogy for what we're going through, man, in the world and definitely in this country, right?
I like that, Ben. That was a burn right there. Yes.
Yeah.
But a good one. I think that's right. You know, I worked with some clients today, and they were identifying the struggles in the country at the moment, you know, and what the mindset that they've had to do to navigate this. And said, you know, like when we move to our new country, you know, we figured that we've got some good training in this.
Yeah.
And there we go. We got somebody who's this.
Yeah, one of your fans, I guess, Benny. You've been called Benny, somebody who knows you.
He's probably got one of his kids to dial in, you know.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Stacking the deck, mate.
I'm just as guilty as Brett because I used to grow up on a pair of skis, right? So I grew up in the mountains.
Yeah.
So when the snowboarders came along, I was like, oh, who are these kids? And this is going to go away soon, and they're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not trying this. And mainly, and I will admit that I've always been. To this day, I don't know how to skateboard. I don't know how to surf. I have balance issues, I guess. So snowboarding was never attractive to me to begin with, and that's why I maybe rejected those who did, who were had the audacity to be on my slope where I do the classic good kind of skiing, right? So, but then I think as the sport evolved, as it developed some big names, the Shaun Whites, right? So as those folks came along, it became quite more attractive to me, more as a spectator. I still don't want to try it, but I have the highest respect now.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think generally, like we're talking about, cultural differences amongst countries and how sport can bridge that, right? I think it's just a matter about us learning about what it is, and having an open mind to embrace it and say, hey, it's different, but it's still cool, And we had to do that with my guys. My guys said, oh, all these alpine skiers, man, some of the nicest kids I've ever met have been alpine skiers. And my kids, my athletes started going, hey, man, they're really cool cats. I'm like, yeah, dude, they get down the hill different than you. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. They have, they have the same, the same issues in life as you do. And I think that's what's great about sport is it's one of the true places in the world where you can actually have a level playing field, all things considered,
Well, and to your point, Ben, it's you help them create commonality, or they discovered commonality across different disciplines that didn't have a lot of intersectionality. So finding common ground, finding mutual respect in light of difference or in light of we don't like each other, whatever the preconceived notion may be. So you're an interculturalist, Ben. Did you know that?
Well, I hope so. Yeah. I think, I think, we tend to, it's the great thing about kids is too, man, they don't tend to overcomplicate things. We tend to do that as adults, right? We tend to make, mountains out of molehills and stuff like that. And I think what's great about sport is that if you're an old dude like me, 51, and I still snowboard, and I've got some really good skier friends and I'll go out with them, but then I see my young rippers ripping up as 13-year-olds. There's, like you said, Christian, there's commonality, and I think life experience is one of the biggest things that sport brings. Does that make sense? I think if you've had and that's why I think, socially, when you look at snowboarding, I think that, there's a lot of different nations doing it, and that's really cool. There's like Japan, China, Korea, New Zealand, Australia, all the European nations, Chile, a whole ton of sports. And, and then what I'm actually most jazzed about as far as action sports is what skateboarding is doing now. Skateboarding is actually being able to merge into other races. And it's not being hamstrung by the prohibitive cost of getting into snowboarding or surfing. To get into skating, you don't need $1 million, right? You can go buy a skateboard at Walmart for $70 and you're on your way. So, that's what's, stoking me out, is that we're seeing a lot of people of color getting into skateboarding now, because the economic sign up to get into it's not as much as, say, snowboarding, where you've got to buy a $500 deck, you've got to buy a $500 season pass, you've got to buy $300 worth of clothes, and and pay $75 for a dodgy hamburger on the hill. You know what I mean? So it's that's what I love about sport, right? So it's a good thing.
Yeah,
awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, mate, all the best for the season. This is
Thank
great.
you.
We're gonna follow along, and because when the next Olympics in China, you said they're in China, and they'll be coming up when? They'll be in 2022.
Yep, 2022 in February. Yeah. So yeah, we're into our Olympic qualification period now. So it's kind of all guns are blazing.
Nice. Do you say break a leg? Is that not what you say?
I try not to. I guess my kind of deal is just land on your feet and be smiling, and it's been a good day. So that's all. That's all I try and tell my kids.
Hang loose, or what is the well wishes that snowboarders give each other?
Mate, it's just, hey man, just be happy. You land on your feet, ride away for another day.
All right.
What these guys do, man, what these guys and girls do is incredible. Pumping up my own sport, man. Like, they are the most underpaid professional athletes in the world for what they do. Just it's not even close. When you it's just so underpaid, and and I think particularly in the United States, it's really tough for a lot of those kids. A lot of other nations have government-funded sport. The US doesn't. So a lot of these kids are doing it for the pure passion of the sport, putting themselves in bodily harm to represent their countries and all that sort of stuff. It's pretty inspiring.
Well, they're in good hands, my man. They're in good hands.
Yeah, everyone that's not with me is, mate. Yeah, no, thanks, buddy. It's good, man. A good bunch of kids. I've been lucky.
All right, mate. Well, all the best, and congratulations on all your success, and may there be many more ahead. And,
yeah, man.
Awesome.
Hopefully we can catch up again, boys. Great hanging out for sure.
No worries. Thanks very much, mate.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, man.
Land on your feet.